Hey, 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 people starting to show up. Hello, everybody.
Hello, hello. Are we live on YouTube?
Hey, people starting to show up.
Yes, we are live on YouTube.
Hello, hello. Okay, excellent. I hear some echo. All right. Welcome everyone to the 7th session of our principal seminar. This one is on privacy. So just briefly, sort of the principle itself. Privacy is the power to selectively reveal oneself to the world. And for us, it's essential to protect privacy in both communications and transactions, as well as being a pseudonymous platform. Additionally, we strive to provide the right of total anonymity. So before going further, before we change things up a bit and sort of do this wall of shame generation collectively and sort of right now live. So essentially, I'm going to ask each one of you to sort of say one thing, and then we'll add it to the wall of shame. If you can come up with more things, that's fine. And if they're duplicates, that's also okay. And if you really can't come up with something, then come with a question or something. The important thing is that this is something that we all are participating in. So I guess who wants to start? I'll just go with the first one. Aksi?
Sorry, is the question what we think about privacy and what we can do better?
Yeah, so essentially the idea with the wall, yeah, exactly. The idea with wall of shame is essentially things that ways we're falling short of this principle. So we're sort of not practicing what we preach, or we can do better. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, I don't have too many ideas there. I would say that especially when it comes to studio, I don't know if this is a wall of shame or if it's something to aspire to. One of the things in designing studio going forward that will be important is to think about, for example, how much information we want to collect from the users and making sure that it's minimal. So, for example, we've been talking about different versions of studio, so whether it's basic or advanced, and let's say a user picks their preferences and says, I'm a basic or I'm an advanced. How do you sort of retain those settings for them logging in multiple times down the line without necessarily having to collect sort of their email address or something, or their identity, to be able to remember their preferences in the past? And I'm sure that we'd have to do it probably without using their email address or something, but I guess it's something that we have to make sure that for studio, at least, we are not taking any more information than is needed.
Thank you so much. Yeah, cool. All right, just let's we can keep it short. That would be great, like just 30 seconds or something. Thank you. That's a good point. I agree with studio and ensuring minimal information. I guess next one, Barry.
I don't know if I have something specifically for the wall of shame in terms of privacy, but I would just maybe give some food for thought where we want to be an open, transparent organization. And it could be hard maybe to balance that with the need for an individual's privacy, especially if we're talking about, making our compensation schemes open to the world and the, identities of the individual contributors open to the world. There's legitimate reasons for individuals to want to stay private within that context. And I don't necessarily have something that may not like something specific, but I think it's something
that's cool. Cool. Right. And we can definitely talk more about these after. So right now I just want to get some sort of seed here and sort of get a bunch of bullet points. Then I'll do the sort of brief presentation, and then we can go back to talking about them more after that. Cool. Danny? Okay, maybe away. Ivan?
Please just remember, y'all, you just need to unmute when somebody asks you to talk. People might not realize that.
All right, Ghana?
Sorry, I have no input so far.
Sorry.
Oh, Ghana said that she didn't have any input so far yet.
Okay. Graham?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of in the application, I think we're doing great stuff with forward perfect secrecy, as well as decoupling the wallet from the whisper key, which is like a great stride towards making the application a lot more private. I mean, honestly, I'll say my only bugbear is that, I mean, Oscar, for example, that if I'm connected with you, you can see my identity inside a public chat, whereas everyone else sees as being anonymous. And that's a privacy concern for me because it means that I can't act in a public group with the assumption that I'm anonymous. I don't know if that's more and being anonymous more so than private, but yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah.
Just to add on to that, that's currently being fixed in one of the work packages, or it's being worked on pretty extensively.
Actually, the right word is not anonymous, but pseudonymous.
Cool. Let's just keep. Okay, cool. All right. Let's see. Anna.
Sorry, guys. I've joined when it's already started, so I think we just fill in the wall of shame about the privacy topic, right?
Yeah, exactly. So the idea we're going through sort of everyone and people can provide their input. And the idea is that we're going to have more sort of people participating in this process and thinking about it actively.
Yeah, so for me, it's like, as we already talked today about the test ferry and actually collecting any information, any logs. I should be able to control them and understand the consequences, like what actually is collected. And ideally, I'd like to have some paranoid mode when I can switch off all things that somehow influence my privacy, so that collect any data. And right now we don't have it, so that's ideally I would like to have it, and then I would be more. I would trust more the app.
Cool. Ben? Maybe not here. JB?
Yeah, mine's really just a +1 to Barry. So how we balance, especially people operations and hiring information with privacy, the privacy of the individual versus the transparency of the org.
Do you have any specific concerns there? Or just generally?
Yeah, so, I think originally we defaulted to kind of openness using Slack channels and public channels to discuss hiring, which could leak sensitive personal information. And we've stopped doing that now.
Cool. Michael? Michelle?
That was Michelle, not Michael.
Michelle. Sorry, Michelle. Maybe not here. All right, Alexi. All right, Ricardo.
Me and Corey was talking about something like this yesterday about the privacy of the identity, and there is this problem that is not mentioned yet, is that in future we are going to have a solution to spam. So if we do everything that is so private and that you cannot filter out the spam, or we don't know yet how to do it. But for the privacy itself, right now we can have multiple accounts. So that's not really private. So this is not anonymous. This is, as I said, this is pseudonymous. So if it's anonymous, everyone has the same name. And the pseudonymous, we have these random names. So that's my input in privacy.
Cool. Sergey?
So two things I would like to add. The first one is relying on third-party services in our source code. And the second one is basically if I add any content, I can know how much funds does this contact has. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Sean?
So for me, it's from a marketing perspective. I think just thinking about how we can develop compelling or engaging content experiences, but then also be mindful of our community's privacy. So trying to balance that.
Could you elaborate, like privacy of?
As in, obviously there's a lot around, like within the sphere of marketing, there's a lot around, being able to capture data to be able to tailor your content and experiences.
Oh, I see. Gotcha.
Yeah, from a marketing perspective,
yeah. Do you mean like Google, like segmentation and these types of things?
Yeah, segmentation, remarketing, things like that, where people may feel like it's an invasion of their privacy.
Yeah, gotcha. Cool. Corey?
Similar to what Sergey said, we tie everything to a single public key. So if you do anything with anybody, they understand everything associated with that public key, whether it be your contact code or all the contents of your wallet, etc.
Yeah, and Falstaff already pointed out, haven't confirmed all contributors want to be listed publicly on People Up site. Do you have anything else?
Yeah, actually, but I just forgot it. I had it in my head, and now you asked me, and it popped out of my head. At the end, I'll remember, and I have a second.
Okay, cool. All right, and I'll just write down some stuff as well. What do I have? I had. We don't know what we are leaking. We don't support private transactions. We don't blah, blah, blah.
All right.
Allow for multiple wallets. Yeah. Do we have any other input from Michelle, Alexi, Ghana, Danny, Ivan, or Ben?
Yeah, Oscar. So I think you may have called me when I was stepping away.
No worries.
In terms of, for an incubator perspective, what we'd like to do is we'd like to open up the entire program to the wider community as much as possible, but we have to strike a balance, especially around the application processes where we want to get the wider community involved, but we need to also be respectful of the fact that some projects may not want to publicize the fact that they are seeking funding or applying or what have you. So that's what we're thinking about now.
Cool. Awesome. Right. And yeah, if anyone has any other points, please feel free to fill it in straight
Yeah, I wanted to add actually. So we actually had a pretty serious security breach that came up when it is that we published all of our signatures to the principals, and then we basically went out and wanted to publicize that. So it's similar to the public key being known on PeopleOps side. It's that everybody who signed the principles is pretty much exposed now if they're continuing to use those keys.
Yeah, good point.
Maybe a better way of saying this exposed keys thing is that we don't have any copy to let people know what they're exposing when they do something. So like people don't know what privacy they're losing with the actions they take within status.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, because that's, I think naturally, especially as people use third-party dApps, users are going to interact with things and leak data, right? And we may not have 100% control over that. So having some sort of mechanism to say, FYI, you've just done this, this, and this, you may or may not have known that, I think is very important.
Cool. If you want to have further discussions, we should have it. I want to just briefly go for a presentation. Do we have any other sort of points I want to capture now, or we can do it async as well? I think we have quite a lot of points that we can cover.
I think that about privacy, for example, myself, I know the consequences, sorry, not the consequences, but what I'm exposing, but I don't know the consequences of that exposure. So I know what I'm making public. I know that my pseudonymous is associated with my name, but I don't know what are the consequences of this.
Yeah. All right, cool. So I'll go through the presentation and then we can have a discussion moderated by Michael. So yeah, this is his quote: "Privacy is dead, get over it," which is something that's said by people dealing in sort of human advertising and so on. And if we look at the sort of first part of our principles, they say this thing about privacy is the power to selectively reveal oneself to the world. And just going back to it, it has sort of that specific phrasing comes from the Cypherpunk Manifesto. You can read here. And the Cypherpunk Cypherpunk group was kind of this small mailing list back in the 90s with maybe, I don't know, not that many 100 people who were participating, but had a sort of disproportionate effect on the internet as we see it today. And so a lot of core ideas and people and movements and ways of thinking about privacy sort of came from this, like BitTorrent and WikiLeaks and Remailers and PDP, Bitcoin. Bitcoin mentioned twice for some reason, EFF, smart contracts, a lot of them sort of were discussed in this main list. And I think there's something interesting here in that if you look back further, before we were sort of connected and with computers and everything, if you just think about the offline world, we have sort of a natural human intuition for what privacy means. You sort of, if you want to talk about something private, you step out of the pub and maybe talk, or you lower your voice, and like there are all these models, and you can feel exposed as a human being, and you can sort of have an intuition about what it means to share things. But as we sort of connected and sort of started using the internet more, this sort of became kind of confusing because we don't know. You need to be like a real expert or really careful to know exactly what you're leaking, and it's even difficult then, as some people brought up. And I guess with the cypherpunk movement, what you saw is that people had a very sort of strong understanding of how sort of these networks work and sort of what the information was leaked and how you could protect it and so on. And this is sort of where you have this power of strong encryption and so on, where it kind of acts as a asymmetrical defense, in that it's very hard to sort of actually crack a strong encryption, which leads to sort of the ability of private communication and end encryption and so on. But it's sort of going against the grain with sort of Facebook and Google and Instagram and so on. So it's sort of been blunted, this sort of natural intuition that humans have or have had for like millennia and so on. But it's sort of, we're seeing sort of a counter movement to that. As an example of this, I just want to mention sort of Vitalik, just in terms of this not actually being obvious at all. So he recently changed his stance to be more pro-privacy, sort of largely due to thinking about like what it means to not have privacy from a signaling point of view and also sort of the surveillance state and so on. So this is sort of not obvious, I think, why it's important and so on. In terms of specific privacy guarantees, I think we have talked about it a bit, but there's things like end-to-end chat It's also things like guarding against traffic analysis, like darkness and metadata. And there's also stuff like private transactions and different methods for that, and more as well. Ricardo brought this up about sort of the difference between pseudo-anonymous and total anonymity. And right now it's sort of tied to a public key, which is sort of your fake name, your pseudo-anonymity, but any action you do associated with that is sort of tied to it. And if you look back historically, you had people like Voltaire who was sort of writing under like close to like 200 different pen names in order to sort of be able to insult the French king and not end up in jail. And then you have things like total anonymity, which is sort of where you don't have a specific identity and every message sort of has only the information that's in it, which is sort of an ideal that's not necessarily compatible sort of with the way we're structuring the app right now, but it's something that we can provide to various extents potentially. Just in terms of understanding this metadata leakage and so on, I just want to show you this thing if you haven't seen it. So this is this product by EFF, and I use uBlock Origin and all these things, but and I haven't sort of tied. I still use JavaScript and stuff. And this is like I have a bunch of add-ons like MetaMask and so on. What this does is it essentially looks at fingerprints, so specific things like what language you're using and different cookies and the fonts you install and so on. And what we can see here is that out of the sort of 2 million something browsers that have tested this sort of fingerprint for my browser is unique. And that means that you can sort of identify my browser session uniquely to me potentially. And you can sort of make then some information, a theoretical argument here about how many bits of information you're leaking. And this is sort of why this metadata lake is so important, because there's so much information we're leaking and we really don't know how much of it we are leaking. So that sort of answered this sort of standard thing about metadata, who cares? Well, the shame we already been through. So I guess with that, I'll hand over to Michael.
Can you please put that link for the test in the chat, and maybe in the slide as well, because that's a pretty good resource. So two things I'd like to start this off with. One, I take issue with privacy being something that we've had for millennia. Actually, I think that it's a very modern thing that we have just from the last century. There's still a lot of people around the world who don't live with any sort of privacy in communal groups. And if you look at architecture, particularly in Europe, you know, the rooms have all of these doors that you go through sequential rooms, and this sort of like classic sort of house layout that we have in America is where people have their own private rooms and their own private bathrooms, is something that's really quite modern. So I'd like to ask in the round, actually, how do each of you see privacy being defined for yourself? What does it mean for you specifically? And I'd like to go through the list again the same way that Oscar did, and I'll start with Akshi. What does privacy mean for you personally?
I think you should decide whoever sees your information. For example, your name, for me, that would be the privacy settings.
Okay, Anna, privacy, what does that mean for you personally? What is your personal definition of privacy?
Yeah, I select to whom what information I can kind of reveal or tell, and I expect that this information will remain as it is. Like if I share with one person, then it's shared with one person, not with a group, for example. Okay. Yeah, that's it.
Barry?
I'm thinking of the best ways to describe it, but maybe an example might be illustrative. I think actually like Satoshi of the Bitcoin white paper is a good example. He chose how much of his identity he wanted to reveal. I mean, very little. But I think everyone should have that kind of option.
Okay, thanks. Danny, are you around? Okay, then we'll move to Ghana.
Hi. So basically, it's when the borders that I set myself are not broken. That's privacy. So basically, if we give the user a possibility to deny access to specific information, we should keep this.
Okay, that's great. Thanks. Graham?
Yeah, pretty much in line with the others. Privacy is the amount of control I have to reveal information.
That was very succinct. I like that one. Yuri, I'm curious what privacy means to you personally. Yeah, you were unmuted for a second there, and then you went back on mute, Yuri. You want to give it another shot? Okay. Looks like some people are having connectivity issues. JB.
Yeah, I mean, for me, privacy is like a wall, and I can choose what I want to keep in within my own walls or let roam free.
Cool. Jonathan? Mr. Rainville, you're on deck. Okay. Alexei, what does privacy mean for you personally?
Yeah, so for me, that's something that I can share with the person as I would share this with myself, so that's some secrets. Yeah.
Cool. Sergey?
Hey, well, I would say it's a managing of leakage of data. I don't want someone to know.
Cool. Sean?
A lot of people have spoken about control, but for me, I guess it's kind of three areas. So who can see information about me, when people can see information about me, and then what information they can specifically see about me. So kind of breaking it up into those different choices.
Cool. So I'd like to.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I silly. I actually closed this thing by accident. You were asking me about privacy, what it means.
Yeah. What does privacy mean for you personally?
Yeah. For me, it's the ability to choose what I want to share with the world in general, and everything that is personal to me should stay, private to me unless I really choose to actually share that information.
Okay, so I'd like to go back to let's see, slide number 3, where Oscar gave the quote about privacy is dead, get over it. So personally, when 9/11 happened, I kind of expected a lot of the surveillance state stuff to happen myself, and I looked at my own electronic footprint up until that time, and I realized that there was literally no way for me to erase myself from the web. And so I went to the other extreme, and I decided to be a glass man and to not basically try and hide anything, because I didn't really see a point in it. So are we literally at a point in time where privacy is dead digitally? And how can we actually, well, I don't want to say guarantee that, but how do you guys think that we can actually make that happen with our application?
Well, I think that actually what's going on right now, people are super excited for the past few years about blockchain, but really, I think what is exciting about this is like the largest public deployment of cryptography in history. And so for the first time, the masses now are starting to understand how cryptography works and how we can leverage it. And so this gives us the opportunity to take privacy back.
If I could,
Yes,
add on to that, I think blockchain was a wonderful application and exposure of what cryptography, asymmetric cryptography can do. Not only that, it incentivized a lot of research in the area. So we're pushing forward the boundaries of what we know applied cryptography can do as it pertains to privacy and secrecy.
So I tend to have a little bit different sort of point of view. I have a huge fear actually of my data on the blockchain being indestructible. And I have a fear that actually this stuff is going to come back to haunt us.
I think what you're referring to in a way, it's the whole issue about the right to be forgotten, which now in the EU, apparently anyone can request Google to delete data in the search results about themselves. And there's been a bit some controversy about it because some even politicians have been using this to sort of like erase news about corruption in the past and things like that. Although it also makes sense for some people that maybe did something in their youth that they repent now. And so I think for those cases, it kind of makes sense. But yeah, there is this whole issue that once the information is public or there's a trail, so to speak, on the web, it can be really hard to take it back. And there's a whole question, it was whatever, it should be possible to take it back to. And all can that be controlled and decide, and especially if it's a decentralized system with immutable properties.
Then we get into the issue of screenshots from chats and messages and attribution, other data trails. So I mean, we can have an individual private conversation, but I can't stop you from screenshotting or logging or copy pasting things.
But there's some plausible deniability to that, though. Right, if it's like screenshots and things like that.
We can separate. Sorry, or we can separate like what app can do and what our, like, let's say someone who I'm talking with can do, right? So of course I can't stop you the same as in the real world. I can't stop my friend from telling something that I've told to my friend. So making a screenshot, for example, or telling it. But I'd like to be in such a space, like, for example, in the room, where if I'm talking with my friend, I'm sure that it's only my friend who can listen to me. Like, not some third party that is collecting some nice data about our conversation, like how many words and in which language, etc. So this, like, I think two separate things, like what people will reveal based on what we share, and what app, and actually the not only app but the network, the space we are talking in would reveal to others.
So I'm curious.
I agree. And
go ahead.
I think we just want to talk about maybe specific specific guarantees instead. So end-to-end encryption is one example of that, and like trying to, because I think it's different depending on what we're talking about, like what specific area we're talking about. If we're talking about darkness and so on, or access to it,
Regarding encryption, we should remember that the algorithms we are using now, they are safe just now. So maybe I can just collect all the messages in the network, and when this algorithm is not safe anymore because there is a new hardware, there is don't know what happened, but then I can start decrypting everyone's message. That would be something to think about us as well. That would be a concern regarding no one can hear what we are talking, because right now we use this. Everyone can read the message encrypted, not decrypted. This is how I see it, and this is a security feature as well. But how long this will last?
So I'd like to use the example of Tor, with the government setting up exit nodes and then doing traffic analysis. Is that something we face as well?
Yes, we can especially if we're having
Yes.
this line of mail servers. So they could potentially become a mail server to know whoever is receiving the message, not who is sending, because it's not guaranteed that whoever sent them the message is the actual sender because of the whisper protocol, but it can actually detect whoever received the message, and in future maybe decrypt them. But when I say the future, this is really uncertain. This is unknown, okay? Maybe they would never break it. Maybe decrypting the messages would be possible, but it would take a lot of energy to do that. So it would not like worth the cost of it. Maybe if even in future is possible, maybe you need to run a quantum computer that is millions of dollars per hour to do that. So it's just a unknown that maybe we should try to make something different about it.
I mean, there's also the possibility maybe some some actor out there, like a nation state or has already technology to let's say decrypt some of this encryption pretty easily. What makes you think they would just disclose it to the public or make it open source that they have this? It would make sense for them to keep it private and leverage that to have an information asymmetry compared with other nations, right?
I think it's important it's important to be skeptical. It's also important to not be overly paranoid and be realistic about threat models. So what I mean by that is that we can say that given what we currently know about cutting edge research for cryptographic algorithms, it seems like this implementation or this sort of reference right now, to the best of our knowledge, is sort of safe, right? And that's as far as you can go if you want to be rigorous about it. But then there's also this article, I forgot what it's called, but about like Mossad or non-Mossad threat models. And of course, if someone wants to do if a nation state wants to do targeted surveillance against you, you have a problem, and you're probably not going to be able to protect yourself against that. But in terms of dragnet surveillance and sort of less sophisticated actors, it's a completely different picture. And I think it's important to have to be able to separate those two things out in terms of guarding against reasonable attacks and so on. I don't know, Corey, do you have any thoughts on that? General line of listening.
That's really important because that differentiates the criminals that are trying to just get messages to scam people and attack them and steal their money, and from security programs from governments that have a lot of resources. So this is a good distinction. I agree with you. It's very unlikely that a small individual, a small hacker would be able to just with their computer do anything.
I'm sorry, Oscar, I didn't hear it. I was actually taking my earbuds out to clean my ears in the process of you asking that question.
So the question is, so there's this article about like Mossad versus non-Mossad threat models or agents. And just in terms of distinguishing the sort of attack vector for a single targeted attack versus dragnet surveillance kind of attacks, and being realistic about sort of threat models and what we're guarding against.
I mean, if someone wants to attack you in today's technology landscape, they can. It's more about motivation and resources. If someone has enough of the both, then there's nothing you can really do. And so a lot of what you're trying to do is trying to increase your privacy and security is just to try and make it as difficult as possible for someone to do something so they give up before you want to ruin their motivation and resources.
So I'd like to, I just posted a link into the chat. Blind in the Panopticon is a really interesting piece that Vinay Gupta wrote for the Cyber Institute in England. And his argument is that there's diminishing returns on having this much data, and to what degree the state can actually, go after people for being homosexual or being Muslim or whatever. It's a very, very interesting paper that I think that a lot of you guys would be interested in reading. So we have to, that comes to the issue of threat models like it is that Oscar mentions. I'd like to go back to, if you guys want to look at slide number 8 from Oscar's presentation. So about privacy guarantees. What do you guys think that we can actually guarantee or actually be pretty secure about with our application? What are the things that we could list that we're very, very strongly opinionated about as being a type of a guarantee? And if we could have like just really short statements rather than.
Your funds won't be stolen. Which, as of currently, because of the test fairy issue, isn't a strong guarantee, but that is a guarantee we should absolutely be able to make.
Not just this, but you're not going to be censored from. I think this is not from this principle, but it's kind of collude with it, because they cannot stop you from sending messages to others.
We should have some kind of quantitative guarantee around darkness. Considering the high cost of using something like Whisper, we should be able to put a number on what the anonymity set is and how much we're leaking, or what sort of the information theoretical leakage is.
Yeah, how is darkness measured? I mean, how do you quantify it? Does it have a rate or a metric at which it's measured by?
It's a good question. I think there's literature on it, but I don't know in detail. But you can look at sort of how many information bits you're leaking and anonymity sets and so on. I think there's been a bunch of work in Tor and sort of mixed networks and so on. I don't know if someone else has more knowledge about this, but I believe there should be metrics for it.
I guess there's, a lot of, in the area of ZK, snarks and starks that we could draw from. In terms of language or possible measurability.
Something I'm wondering if, I don't know if this is slightly related, but is the use of our mail servers, right? They're basically just like central points within status right now. Is there a privacy concern with connecting to the mail servers that we currently use?
Privacy concern is that you're directly trusting a direct peer-to-peer connection. So if A is using mail server to live messages, you can sort of see the envelopes you're getting from that. You get it sent straight to your IP as opposed to through the general Whisper network in a sense. So it's a trusted form of relationship.
And I think the model you subscribe to an address, so the mail server knows that you want that messages.
How will that change once it is that we have more nodes and more mail servers in the network, and when we actually get to the point of it being off of our cluster and our and individual devices being nodes in the network? Do we have any sort of extrapolated data on what how the threat model changes with the growth of the network?
I think it gets more likely because then your friends can start doing this job, and they have much less incentives from tracking you. Or you could run yourself to your own messages if you have a spare computer in internet connection in your home.
Okay, but my question is a little bit more specific. Do we have any sort of numbers about how it is that the threat model decreases with the size of the network increasing?
It depends on where the data lives, because in the current model you have a data to a specific mail server node, and right now all mail service nodes we host have all the data. But if you sort of have a specific trust relationship, then maybe the picture looks different. What we're trying to work towards is removing the high availability requirement, which would mean that the data is spread out through Swarm or something like this. And then it wouldn't matter which mail server you connect to. So it depends on the specifics of how we implement it.
Okay, again, so maybe what to do there is some sort of numerical graph that extrapolates this to make it clear to people.
I mean, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, probably the clearest one is going to be the amount of data that's used to send a message. So my understanding is that the darker or the more private you want a message, you got to send it through bouncing around as many nodes as possible to defeat traffic analysis. The more of that is done, the more resources it takes. So the more resources that's been used to send a message, theoretically it should be darker than if it just used the minimal amount. But really the guy to talk to this about would be Adam. Adam and Dimitri are like the most knowledgeable.
Okay, cool. Let's move on to the number 12, where the wall of shame is there. 3 issues that Oscar started off with on his slide: that we don't know what we're leaking, we don't support private transactions, we don't support multiple identities and wallets. Are the last 2 things? It's obvious that we're striving towards the first one with these conversations and with the way that we're approaching things. What are we doing to move towards supporting private transactions and supporting multiple identities and wallets?
So some of the work packages and identity we're currently working on allowing you to spin up basically multiple identities within the status app. So you have a public identity, which basically is would be your default, that you can choose settings on what you expose to people. And then you can also spin up a number of pseudonymous identities that are separate from that, completely separate from that, including the separate whisper key and so on and so forth. And whenever you enter in a chat, whether it be one-on-one, group chat, or public, you join as one of those identities, and then you interact with that chat as that person, which should allow you to have at least better options and settings and better knowledge about who you are, or what part of you that you're exposing to the chat that you're interacting with.
So we're striving towards more granularity. This is my left thumb. You get to see my knee. You get to see my dog, etc.
Yeah, and with that, because we're separating the keys, both with the Whisper and your account, your wallet key, and then potentially different Whisper keys for different identities. We're also separating the ability to automatically see funds associated with public chats, which is in my opinion is a relatively large amount of privacy gain as opposed to how things work now.
Yeah, about this granularity, we could make a new type of identity which changes automatically every 15 minutes or something like this, or every message is a new identity that could be even based on the contents of the message. So that would not make it granular, but actual anonymous.
So let me, there's a topic that's been going on now as a result of missing messages in the client. And we're looking at increasing the amount of history it is that we retrieve. Can we talk about maybe making this also a user setting so that a user could choose himself how long it is that his data is retrievable? Is that doable? So if I say, okay, these messages that I've sent are, I'm putting a limit on them. They are, like Snapchat is, they're only available for the next hour. They're available for the next day. I want them to be perpetuated for a month. Is that something we could strive towards? Is that technically doable?
I think yes. We could change the mail server scheme to maybe temporarily you become a mail server for your messages. For example, you send an encrypted message to a public chat, and whoever wants to see that message needs to request you the decryption of it. So I think it would be a way to do it.
So I'm a large fan of data ephemerality, and for 2 reasons. One, for the security and privacy concerns, and secondly, in terms of perpetuating data on distributed decentralized networks. Nobody's figured out a cost model yet. We have some models out there that are supposed to be working. Can we talk about maybe making this a feature that that data disappears, that's a default setting, and that people then, we can look towards having incentive models about how it is that people perpetuate their data, because I think that that's going to be a large issue as we move forward into this new technology. How do you guys feel about that?
So Signal has this model which I like, just checking out. So they have this disappearing messages, and the idea is if you're one-to-one chat or group chat, you can sort of negotiate after how long messages self-destruct. Unfortunately, it doesn't work for me because it says 1 week, but I can see all the messages. But the idea is nice. That is sort of a social negotiation, and then you both honor it, presumably, hopefully.
So for me, there's two issues about this here. There's the privacy concerns, and then there's actually the economic concern. So how much of this data do we need to be perpetuating in this sense? Yeah, and there's a privacy trade-off there about how long it is that you perpetuate data as well. So it's sort of like paying forward or not paying just means that your data disappears after really a short period of time. There's just a huge amount of flotsam and jetsam and cat pictures and individual, personal okays and lols and whatever that don't really need to be perpetuated in the network. So maybe we could even have a setting where you can say, hey, this specific message I want to perpetuate into the future for whatever reason is you choose to do that, whether it's a privacy concern or an economic one.
I think it's great. We can start that just as a trust model. And later we could, if possible, introduce crypto economics into it to ensure that this will happen. Because right now you can say, I want this message just 5 minutes. And once you have a forked client that doesn't respect it, it would be not anymore as intended. But I think basing in a trust model will make things easier to us to work in our mail servers. And even when I open the app, there is a lot of messages in some channels that I'm not interested in. I just want actually the new messages or the important ones.
So my question is more along the lines of, can we actually program in data destruction with messaging? That no matter who the client is that receives it, that the message comes with a self-destruction packet?
I think that's not possible.
You can never guarantee it. It's only on a sort of best effort basis.
Cool. So we're here at 7 minutes before the top of the hour. I'd like to go back up to the top with all the items that we started with on our wall of shame. If you guys want to take a review at that and mention anything else, additional comments about this long wall of shame, which you guys all contributed to, and then we can close up this session and come back for the next one.
I think that what we need in status is something like circles of trust, where you choose groups of people that probably is your contacts to share your information. And that's not really clear in the user interface. So I think that's would be for privacy, in my opinion, just to conclude this.
So some type of, so essentially address book function where you have group permissions that you can assign about your data.
Yes, and of course, having multiple identities and for example, for a status trust of circle, I could have an identity, and for my family, I could have another identity. And this is automatically, these circles of trust are managed by the client.
So then we would need some sort of interface switching per identity inside the client as well. So basically,
sorry to interrupt. Should we take a 10-minute break and then go back to transparency?
Is there anything else
So
that
5
anyone
minutes
wants to add on privacy before we take our break? Okay, cool. See you guys back here in 10 minutes.